But one of the great things now that you've got to consider, if you're starting to invest and you subscribe to my theory that people are moving into the state, the economy is sound and like those of Greece, then you've actually got to start to look at how you're going to structure your investments. And in the past, you probably would have gone to Mark, organised finance, collaterally mortgaged your house up to the investment property, met the shortfall, came the tax deduction. There's another way of actually doing it where you actually use your superannuation. And what we've noticed, we deal a lot in superannuation, but there's a lot of people out there, particularly yourselves, have the same characteristics as our clients who have self-managed funds. So I'm just wondering who amongst you has self-managed funds? Do any of you use borrowing capacity within your self-managed funds for property? Are you familiar with that? Okay. Well, our clients, I would imagine, have the same characteristics as you. They use the self-managed funds basically for control, transparency of costs and flexibility. But also, a number of our clients use it for asset protection as well. And what we're subscribing tonight is that there's the chance here, particularly if you want to borrow through your super fund or use your super fund, or you're a little bit worried about the equities markets, particularly with the recent collapses, is that there may be an opportunity here that you can use the equity in your self-managed funds. And this basically came about in 2007, where the legislation was passed. How many of you actually had Telstra shares? I'll go back a little bit. How many of you had Telstra? Right? And Telstra, if you're in the original float, for instance, you put some money down, ultimately paid a second portion, and then fully owned the shares. Familiar with that concept? Well, you can actually do that with property, where your super fund can actually throw some money down, you can borrow some money, and you can buy a property through what's called a warrant trust. It's a similar concept to that of Telstra, similar to that of the Commonwealth Bank. And basically, how it works is that a trust, a family trust, well, not a family trust, but a warrant trust is actually established. And you go to the bank of your choice, or you go and see Mark, and they'll organise finance for you. So the bank will contribute into the trust, the super fund will contribute into the trust. But probably the most advantageous aspect of all this is the tax side. For those of you who are over 55, have many of you come across the concept of transition pensions? No? Transition pensions, all the money in your super fund can actually go into, you can actually start paying yourself a pension from the age of 55. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. The advantage of that is that your superannuation fund then becomes a tax-free vehicle. And if the superannuation fund ultimately contributes money to a warrant trust, the warrant trust enjoys the same tax treatment as your super fund. So if you are, say, in your late 40s or mid-40s and you buy a property and you buy it for a long-term investment because you're in a stable economy, the chances are if you if you've done it via a warrant trust, then ultimately you can sell that property and there's no tax. So we can go through that with you in some detail. It's an interesting concept. So the main reason for that tax is that the super fund is a 100% beneficial owner of the trust. That's why. So who benefits most from all this? It's the wealth accumulators. It's the people that own businesses that may want to rent the premises in which they're operating. It's investors seeking to take advantage of the concessional tax treatments. And finally, it's the investors looking just to build a property portfolio. In the pack outside, I've actually given an example where someone has $1 million in super and wants to throw $500,000 towards property, or someone that has $500,000 in super wants to put $250,000 towards property. The banks are quite willing to lend on this. The documentation is quite onerous, and the structure of how the super fund must, or the plan of the super fund going forward, must be very well documented. So, in essence, what I'm suggesting to you tonight is that, unlike the Greases of the world, the Australian economy is quite sound. The South Australian economy is really sound. And if you are choosing to invest in property in an economy that's particularly sound with a growing population, then you want to do it in such a vehicle that you don't ultimately pay tax at the end.